Welcome back to News Talk. For the first time ever, a very popular local fish is on the do not eat list. Recent testing in the Potomac River has turned up extremely elevated levels of PCBs in rockfish. ABC 7 government watchdog investigator Chris Pabst has the story.
Rockfish, or striped bass or stripers, are an important part of our local economy. It's a very popular fish for recreational and commercial fishermen. But now DC says you should not eat it.
A little bit over 5 pounds.
At the Main Avenue Fish Market in D.C., rockfish are big business.
One of the most popular fish we have. You can fry it, you can grill it, bake it.
It's a main course on regional restaurant menus and dinner tables. It's a fish that's helped spawn an entire charter boat industry.
Locally, it's pretty important.
But recent rockfish testing in the Potomac has found concerning levels of PCBs. A PCB is a man-made industrial compound that's no longer produced, but still found in the environment. It's also a known carcinogen. Rockfish testing last year in D.C. found levels of 1,200 parts per billion, nearly 10 times higher than the most recent testing in Virginia and Maryland. This prompted D.C. to add rockfish to the do not eat list for the first time ever.
We don't believe there's a safe level for consumption.
Rockfish migrate, so it's not known where they're picking up the toxin. Tommy Wells, the director of the Department of Energy and Environment that did the testing, hopes people take this news seriously, but also understands the local economic impact it could have.
I hope that people don't stop going out, charter boats, recreational fishing along the banks. I'll continue to catch rockfish, but I'll release them.
While rockfish were added to the do not eat list, that same testing of the Potomac River found other area fish are getting healthier and cleaner. Catfish were removed from the do not eat list. DC says you can now consume them on a limited basis. In Southwest DC, Chris Pabst, News Channel 8.
And Chris joins us right now. Chris, good to see you. This is unsettling news, though. Something that we put in our mouths and have on our dinner plates and feed our families is maybe not all that it should be as far as quality goes. How did you hear about this?
Well, we got a tip from the Department of Energy and Environment that they had done this testing in the middle of last year in 2015, and they found these alarming levels of these PCBs. And this is something that when you ingest it, it does stay in your system for a really long time. The reason PCBs were used is because they're virtually indestructible. That was the point of them as an industrial compound. They withstand massive amounts of heat, and as a result of that, when they get into the environment, they're there for centuries, and they don't break down and they don't go away. And what happens is the way they get into the fish is that they go into the sediment. Worms are in the sediment. Small fish eat the worms, and then it works its way up the food chain. So you get to a large predator like a rockfish or a striped bass, and over years they have eaten so many fish that they accumulate all of these PCBs from all the little fish, and then they get contaminated with them. So when we heard of this, and we know how popular of a fish this is in local restaurants, there's a huge fishing industry, commercial and recreational in Maryland, based on rockfish, we decided that, okay, well, we need to start looking into this a little bit more, especially because the testing's all over the place in terms of the levels of PCBs found in fish. So earlier this week, we did another story about the testing, and we learned that Maryland and Virginia test very differently than how DC tests. And so we did these stories to let the people know, and it's not a story to scare anybody, but just let you know how the testing is different and why these different PCB levels are being reported by the governments.
Wow. It's so weird, too, that you reported that some fish are actually getting cleaner over the years. How is that possible? Are they not eating the worms?
They are not migratory fish. Rockfish are migratory, so they run up to Maine, they run down to the Carolinas, and they come up into the Anacostia and the Potomac to spawn, and then run right back out into the ocean.
Oh, so we don't have an idea where they picked this up.
Exactly, and that's the problem. So the fish that DC tested are the same fish that Maryland and Virginia are testing, but they're getting these very wide ranges of PCBs. Now, a lot of the native fish that you're talking about that are getting healthier, they're here. they're not running around. They're not traveling hundreds of miles. They're staying in the Potomac. They're staying in the Anacostia, and those are getting cleaner as a result of those waterways getting cleaner.
So what does that tell you? That the rockfish did not pick it up locally?
They did not pick it up locally, but the way that the testing is done is that when a PCB is ingested by a fish, it's kept in the fat of the fish, and the fat is right under the skin. Well, D.C. keeps with the EPA guidelines. They test the entire fish. Maryland and Virginia cut the skin off before the testing. So essentially, what Maryland and Virginia do is they cut away the PCBs and then test the fish for PCBs. And then they tell people based on that what the consumption of that fish should be, how much you should be eating it, because there's still PCBs in it, but since they're cutting so many away, they're getting drastically different results from what D.C. is getting. And a lot of people do cook this fish. They do prepare the fish with the skin on it. And with the way that Maryland and Virginia are testing the fish and relaying that information to the public and not telling the public that we're testing it differently from how D.C. is testing it, people can get the wrong idea, and they think that they're eating the recommended amount of this fish, but since they're cooking it with the skin, they're ingesting a lot more of these PCBs.
Wow. And according to your piece, there's no safe level of PCB in a fish to ingest?
Well, there are advisories. For example, in Maryland has an advisory of you can eat 3 meals of, I think, up to 8 ounces a month. And they're saying that is a safe amount to eat based on their PCB levels that they found on their testing of removing the skin. D.C. is saying, based on our testing with the skin on the fish, there is no safe level to eat this fish at any time.
So, you know, with this fish being so popular around here, it certainly has an effect on the economy, I would think. I mean, you've got charter boats, right? You've got all the fish markets around the waterfront and restaurants that rely on these markets. So how is this really affecting, you know, our economy?
Well, soon after D.C. released its Do Not Eat advisory that we reported on about 2 weeks ago, a couple departments, the Department of Natural Resources and Department of Environment in Maryland, quickly responded, and they released their own statements saying, DC's rockfish are not our rockfish. Our rockfish are safe to eat. You can have up to 3 meals a month. Here are our advisories, but do cut the skin off before you prepare it. That was the advisory that both of them sent out. So they do understand the impact that this can have on the local economy. A lot of people eat this fish, and we are preparing another story that we have coming up in a couple weeks where we're calling local restaurants. This is part of the story, and we have found about 25 already that do prepare this fish with the skin on it. And the way that Maryland tests it without the skin is under the assumption that that is how people are preparing it. And in fact, a lot of restaurants and a lot of people do not prepare it that way, but yet they think that the PCB levels they're eating are safe, but they don't know that that's because of the way Maryland cuts the skin off before testing it. So it can have a big effect.
All right, your pieces have already run, and you've got a third one coming up in the next few months, right?
And people can head to WJLA.com. You can watch the first one that you just saw if you want to look at the numbers a little bit more closely on what the PCB levels are. We had one run a couple days ago, getting more in detail about this testing and how it's done and why it's done that way.
Important stuff. Thanks for stopping by. Chris Patz, ABC 7 reporter. And we're back with a program note right after this.